So I do want to share a few words with you this morning, this afternoon. But first of all, it's good to be back in a full sanctuary. So let me hear your voices. Shana Tova. It's good to be back, but as many of you know, this has been a very difficult year. Not just for me, but for many people in this congregation. I've seen families divided over masking. I've seen families divided over vaccinations. I've seen families divided over politics. I've seen people struggle with disease, with cancer. I've seen people isolated, surgeries delayed, weddings canceled, dreams deferred. I've even seen families come apart. And so this morning, I'd like to explore with you what Judaism has to teach us about dealing with pain. I guess in the vernacular of our day, about dealing with the variants, those unwelcome and unexpected moments that suddenly intervene in our lives. Unfortunately for all of us, Judaism has a lot to say about pain because we are a people that has experienced pain many times in our history. From the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in the year 70 CE to the expulsion from Spain in 1492. From the expulsion from Portugal in 1497 to the expulsion from France 1182, England 1290, even Yemen in 2021. We are a people that has known great pain. From pandemic to pogrom to, of course, the horrors of the Holocaust, we have experienced pain. And so today I want to explore with you what a 2,000-year-old tradition has to teach us for this moment in time. Now, of course, we could begin with the power of peoplehood, something truly extraordinary, about how Judaism facilitates a caring community, creating connections between individuals we don't even know. Jews who live halfway around the world in countries we've never visited before, and they actually care for us. The power of Jewish peoplehood. When Jews are suffering, Israel steps in, or the Federation, CJP, or the synagogue. We step in because we are responsible for one another. And pain shared is pain lessened. That is the power of peoplehood. Or, of course, we could talk about the power of Jewish ritual. And now that I'm in my 29th year as a rabbi, I continue to be amazed by the power of Jewish ritual, a ritual that has been honed over centuries of pain and provides comfort to so many. And yet today, I don't want to focus on peoplehood or ritual. I want to focus on something different, something that I actually consider to be the secret sauce of Judaism, something that has instructed me during this past year. And that is Jewish theology, philosophy, the Jewish worldview that I believe can best prepare us for this moment. And specifically the variants, those unexpected and unwelcome moments that at one time or another will unfortunately enter our lives. And so we begin in probably the darkest time in Jewish history, the Holocaust. The year was 1942. Only 9 months after his wedding day, that Viktor Frankl and his family were forced onto a train by the Nazis and carried off to Theresienstadt, a small Jewish ghetto 35 miles north of Prague. Frankl's dad would eventually die there of starvation and pneumonia, and after a few painful years, Frankl and his family were transferred to Auschwitz, the death camp where Frankl's mother and brother were murdered in the gas chambers. Frankl was then transferred to Bergen-Belsen, where his wife was killed. And by the time the camps were liberated in 1945, Frankl had absolutely nothing. His father, his mother, his brother, his wife, he had lost his entire family to the Nazis. And so after the war, he returned home to Vienna, his birthplace, because he had no place to go. No family, no home, no possessions. And yet he knew he still had one thing that the Nazis could never take away. And that was his mind. And after only 1 year in Vienna, in 1946, Frankl published a book in German entitled A Psychologist Experiences the Concentration Camp. A small, dense book that very few people read. Until 1959, 13 years later, when that same dense, small book was translated into English and given a different title, now entitled Man's Search for Meaning, becoming one of the most influential books of the last century, helping millions and millions of people around the globe deal with pain. And so today I would like to explore with you Frankl's thinking and his school of logotherapy, but more than that, I want to explore with you why it is so Jewish. So here we go. Number one, Frankl writes, everything can be taken from a human being, meaning they can take your health, your sleep, your food, just as they did in the Holocaust. But one thing they can never take away. And that is the freedom to choose, he writes. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. To choose one's way. Meaning, according to Frankl, terrible things may happen to us, events we cannot control. But there is always one thing we can control, and that is our reaction to the event. Now, modern psychologists actually have a name for this, no surprise there. They call it primary control versus secondary control. Now, primary control is when you can actually control an event, meaning you get sick, you go to a doctor to fix it. A variant comes, you get a vaccine to try to escape it. You're sitting in traffic, you try driving a different way to avoid it. You get in a fight with your neighbor, you can move, or you can try a different way to relate to them. But you do something. That is primary control. And yet we all know that sometimes events occur in our lives where there is nothing you can do to control the event. There is no primary control. But according to Frankl, in these moments, there's secondary control. When you don't try to change the event, but you control your reaction instead. Frankl writes, we who lived in the concentration camps with no control can remember the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken away from a human being, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. And so we read on the high holy days, Uvacharta b'chaim, choose life so that you and your descendants may live. We read on Rosh Hashanah in the prayer book tomorrow, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. God created the world, and it was good. And God created Adam and Eve, and they were very good because they had choice. And so do we. And so when pain comes, Frankl reminds us we are to ask, how are we going to react to the situation? How are we going to live our lives? And will we choose lives of love and caring and gratitude rather than anger, frustration, or bitterness? We no longer should ask, why did this happen to me? but begin to move to why did this happen for me? We are created to choose even when life gets difficult. Frankl saw this even in the Holocaust. That's secondary control. So 1, secondary control. But 2, some people called Frankl unrealistic. How can you live with secondary control? How can you live a life of compassion when life is so difficult and things are being thrown your way? And here's the secret, Frankl writes. Don't aim at success. The more you aim at success and make it a target, the more you're going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued, he writes. It must ensue. And it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself. Meaning, and we know this, the best way to achieve happiness is not to pursue laughter or joy. The best way to achieve happiness is to dedicate oneself to a cause that is greater than yourself. You see, Adam and Eve were not placed in the garden to luxuriate and eat apples and bananas. They were placed in the garden to be partners with God, naming each object, organizing life with purpose, creators in the wonders of creation. The Midrash expands this concept in our tradition by saying God created everything in the world a little incomplete. According to the Midrash, and it's beautiful, it says, instead of making bread grow out of the earth, which God could have done, God made wheat so that we might make it into bread. Instead of making the earth of bricks, the Midrash tells us, God made clay so that we might shape it. In fact, that's one of the reasons that the rabbis gave for circumcision, believe it or not. They said you might think that God created the human being in perfect form. But no, on the 8th day, human beings need to do a little something to make it better, because we are partners in the work of creation. You see, according to the Jewish tradition, creation hasn't stopped. We read in the prayer book every morning, Mechadesh b'chol yom, the world is created each and every day, and our job is to engage in it. Frankl loved to quote Nietzsche, who wrote, those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. And Judaism provides that why, to be partners with God in creation, otherwise known as purpose. So, we've got control, choice, choose a life of purpose. Number 3. It's easy to say choose a life of purpose, but you need to take small steps to get there. Because the Jewish journey of purpose can be long and hard. It reminds me of a study I just recently read of sports psychologists performing a study on marathoners and iron. Can I say iron men? Iron people? Iron women? What's the right terminology? Long race, people who do long races. They studied these people, and they realized that the best ones are the ones that break down the race into smaller sections and then try to achieve small victories along the way. Because being a partner with God in creation is just too vast. We need to break down life into small sections. And so in Judaism, we're given the Sabbath. Week after week, we're told. And this year, we might want to light candles, come to services, eat challah, slow down, and mark smaller moments in life in the journey, and then do small deeds, otherwise known as mitzvot. Small acts, reaching out to a person in need, forgiving someone who's done you wrong. One small act of kindness and love every day, one step at a time, in a life of purpose, one new phrase in the book of life. Choose life, take control, lead a life of purpose, take small steps. And finally, number 4, You need a coach, because pain is real and it can knock you down. Now, I don't want you to get me wrong. This is not a sermon about embracing pain, that somehow it builds resilience, it's good for you. Like some Kelly Clarkson, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Today I want to say pain is awful. It hurts. But you need more than comforters in your life. You need more than people focused on assuaging the pain of the past. You need coaches in your life. People who remind you not just to look back, but to look ahead. To look ahead at the promise of the future. Who inspire you to live a life of purpose. To choose love and caring and patience and gratitude. And get this, I think the greatest coach of all is actually Jewish theology. That Jewish worldview. That Jewish philosophy found in our prayer book. That says we are not sufferers. We are creators. We are creators, partners with God in creation. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. God created the world, transforming chaos into order, and so can we. See, here's the deal. Actually, I sound like Joe Biden now. Doesn't he say that? That's never crept into my writing or speaking. But I must admit, I'm not sure about many things in Jewish theology. I'm not sure about what happens after you die, or why do bad things happen to good people. But this I believe, that God wants the best for us, and that God wants the best from us. And so today, let us ask ourselves, how are we going to live better this year? Even when pain comes, how are we going to be the people that God intended us to be? Because after all, we only have one life to live, and it's happening right now. Come, let us create the world so that when we look back on our lives, we too can say, it was good. It was very, very good. Happy New Year. Hashanah Tova.